Welcome, everybody, to our April reading. We have Rick Lupert here today, and we're going to have a little bit of a different format than usual. Typically, our guest poet will share the poems, and then we'll sort of at the end of their presentations give a chance to comment. But there's just so much rich material in Rick's work. I just really enjoyed reading him and conversing with him online. That we're going to deviate, and we'll go maybe every couple poems. We'll sort of open up for feedback and reactions. And I wanted to start off, Rick, by just asking you first about what was the beginning of your poetic journey.
Well, Rick, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me. Anytime another person named Rick asks me to do something, it just feels like, well, this is a great opportunity for Ricks to gather. At the Cobalt reading that I host, there was once 3 Ricks at once. It was like a Rickapalooza, I felt, it just feels like, well, we're in this unique club and I should do whatever Rick wants me to do. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for bringing me here. And it's nice to see everyone who's here as well. How did I begin my poetry journey? Well, I remember when I was in 3rd grade, some poets came to my school, probably very similar to a program like California Poets in the School, to work with us and to get us to write poems. And I remember at the end of their time with us, they gave us a book they'd put together of everything that we'd written. And I had an acrostic poem, 3 lines, about pigs in it. Pigs are very piggish, irregularly attached to mud. Gosh darn it, pigs are messy. And to my knowledge, that's my very first published poem, and that happened in 3rd grade. I didn't think much about poetry probably for a long time outside of what was taught in school as the years went on. Kind of an observational person, poet, funny person maybe. And so I'm always, would see lots of things and think of funny things to say about them and say them out loud, but then lose them forever because they would just be said once. And I thought, okay, well, I should carry around a little blank book and write these things down so I don't lose them. And so I started doing that. And sometimes I found myself just writing in it, not just writing down a thing that I had thought, and the things started getting longer. And this was probably in the mid 90s, I would say. And I wasn't sure what I was doing. And I saw in the LA Weekly, which is Los Angeles's, weekly alternative paper, that there was an event at a place called the Iguana Cafe, which no longer exists, but at the time was a mecca for creative people of all kinds: poets, writers, singers, songwriters, actors. Whatever you could do that was creative, you could do it on the stage there. And they were having an event called the Poets Circle. And what you would do is you would show up to this event and sit in a circle and read a poem, and people would give you feedback on it. And I'd never been, and I thought, okay, I'm writing these ridiculous things, and and I don't know what it is, and I'm going to go to this event and read my things, and they'll tell me, okay, that's not poetry, and then I'll know, and I can move on with my life and do something else. And as it turned out, they were incredibly encouraging with what I'd read, and I sort of was forced to identify myself as a poet at that time. And since then, there pretty much hasn't been a time that I haven't been involved with poetry, going to poetry readings, going to open mics, hosting one, writing, reading, etc. So there you go. That's the answer to that question.
What are your favorite topics and sources of inspiration?
Great question. My wife, for sure, is my muse, especially in my travel poetry books. Most of my books are written over a couple-week period when we're on a trip somewhere, which is kind of cheating because I do write the whole rest of the year when we're not on vacation. But she's very funny, sometimes unintentionally so. And I find just documenting the things that she says and does and reacts to is a great source of inspiration for me. So there's that. I think I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of observational. So when I see something that seems askew to me or odd or strange, which I'm kind of ripe for when traveling, because you're in a different place and everything is kind of new. That really opens up my muse a lot too. And as you may know, I read a lot of Jewish poetry and have the opportunity to read it at synagogues and different places. And so sometimes I'm just specifically asked, do you have a poem about this particular topic? And if I don't, really what they mean is, can you have one? And pretty soon, because we're going to need it for this event or a service or something like that. So, it's by assignment. And actually every single week I write a poem responding to text in that week's Torah portion. So at the very least, I'm writing one poem a week about that if I'm not finding inspiration elsewhere.
Right. And one of your books that I've really enjoyed is called God Wrestler, a poem for every Torah portion. And I know that Jacob's name was changed to Israel because he was somebody who wrestled with the angel and wrestled with God. What do you wrestle with?
That, I think one of and maybe anyone who's a writer might relate to this, but if you ever kind of think that you are too busy assessing an experience that you're having rather than actually having it, and I think that's sort of a curse of artists and poets, where we're experiencing something on one level because we're there, but sometimes it's hard to really let ourselves go and immerse ourselves in it because we're seeing it through our artist's filter, and judging it and assessing it and trying to figure out what it means while it's happening rather than really enjoying the moment, as it were. So I definitely wrestle with that artistically. Just as a human being, in particular in America, I really wrestle with what I'm seeing happening in our country. It seems every day there's something that happens, whether it's politically or with guns or with Florida, that just seems really frustrating and anti-progress, and backwards and that kind of thing. So I really wrestle with that too. Also, I really don't like mayonnaise, and if that accidentally shows up on food that I ordered, that's a big problem for me as well.
I'm the same way with coconut. So let me do a formal introduction here to read your bio. Rick Lupert has been involved with poetry in Los Angeles since 1990. He is a recipient of the 2017 Ted Slade Award and then the 2014 Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center Distinguished Service Award, a three-time Pushcart Prize nominee and the Best of the Net nominee. He has served as co-director of the Valley Contemporary Poets for 2 years and created Poetry Superhighway. Rick hosted the weekly Cobalt Cafe reading for almost 21 years, which has lived on as a weekly Zoom series since early 2020. His spoken word album, Rick Lupert Live and Dead, which I thoroughly recommend, features 25 studio and live tracks. He's authored 26 collections of poetry, including I Am Not Writing a Book of Poems in Hawaii, the Tokyo Van Nuys Express, and God Wrestler, a poem for every Torah portion, and edited anthologies. And I'm throwing in here the Gettysburg Undress. Poet the Door, Extrastia Gone Wild, Poets Haggadah, and the noir anthology The Night Goes On All Night. He also writes and draws with Brendan Constantine, the daily webcomic Cat and Banana, and writes a Jewish poetry column for jewishjournal.com. He's been lucky enough to read his poetry all over the world. And so I already have listed some of those web links in the email there. And Rick, I turn this over to you.
Okay, well, thank you again, Rick, for having me. I'm really honored to be here and to see some names that I've known for a long time, and meet new people as well. And so I guess I'll read a couple poems and then and see if you want to chime in at that point. This is a relatively new one. Not too long ago, there was an epidemic of Chinese spy balloons parading in the skies over North America, and like any citizen, I was very concerned about that and what they were seeing. So I wrote this poem called "What the Chinese Spy Balloon Saw." A wayward seagull, the militias of North Dakota, all the lost things, including your car keys, the remote control, Amelia Earhart, America in all its grandeur, including Mount Rushmore, which I have yet to see, lucky Chinese spy balloon. Two kids in a field of sunflowers hoping they don't get caught. The discarded second spaces after periods from the typewriter era. Acres of books about biorhythms. Remember biorhythms? The Chinese spy balloon does. Your thinning hair. Who am I kidding? My thinning hair. Saddam Hussein's backup hole, one of John Travolta's faces, my uncle on another one of his benders, Janet Jackson's Super Bowl nipple, it's still out there. People shouting obscenities thinking no one's watching. The funk, the jam, the Burning Man, the ladies of the night, that vibe we miss, the Watusi, the realization it always wanted to be a Chinese water balloon. Where all the time went, natives aiming their guns in the air, but not its mother. It's still looking for its mother. So there's that one. And here's a very short one that I wrote after seeing a headline, I think in a food magazine, on the headline, which is also the title of the poem, How to Tell If Fish is Bad. Did you catch it next to the body, with the knife still in its fin, looking at you dead on with one of its fish side eyes? No doubt that fish is bad. You want me to keep going, or do?
Sure. No, let's, anybody want to chime in?
Yeah, Rick, this is Dan from Yosemite. I love satire, I really do. And your use of all of the current kind of pop cultural things that you use to make your point, I think it's pretty incredible. And I'd forgotten about a bunch of those things, God help me. I would think that those should be on everybody's minds continuously if they're good citizens and they want to have an honorable country in which to live. But thank you for that poem.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, one of the things that I think about, well, there's two ways to kind of contextualize what you said. One is, as writers, as artists of any kind, we are just filtering the way we experience the world through our artistic genre. Whether we're a writer or a painter or a musician writing a song or a piece of music, we can take the same thing that we see, whether it's a news event or a funny sign, and if we're a painter, we'll take that same thing and that artistic thing within us will turn it into a painting. And if we're a poet, it'll turn it into a poem. So the other part of that is, my suggestion to people when they say, well, I have writer's block, I don't know what to write about. I say, well, my gosh, have you just looked around your room and seen what's there, or checked a newspaper or looked out your window? Surely there's something that deserves to be written down, that only you have that only you have something unique to say that no one else has to say about it. So
sure.
Thank you, Dan.
Good point.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Well, the next couple of poems I want to read are from my most recent book that you mentioned. It's called "I Am Not Writing a Book of Poems in Hawaii," and that title came about. And thank you for asking. That title came about because this was I'm lucky enough to go on a vacation with my wife every year. And as I mentioned, I have a lot of travel books, and on almost all of them, I've written a whole book of poems on them. A lot of them are really short observations written on the spot. And so then the pandemic came along, and I didn't write one for a couple of years because we didn't go anywhere. And the pandemic ended, and we were trying to think, well, where are we going to go this year? And we'd never been to Hawaii. And I thought, okay, well, why don't we go there? That seems like an easy place to go. And we'll go, instead of sending our son to camp and going on vacation, then we'll wait till he comes back, and then we'll take him, and it'll be a nice, easy thing. And I thought, okay, this is a shorter trip. My son's going to be with me. There's no way I'm going to write a book on this trip under those circumstances. And sure enough, I wrote a book on that trip under those circumstances, and it kept coming up that I'm not writing a book. It's even mentioned in some of the poems. So here's a couple of them. This first one was written after spending a lot of time wandering around the island of Oahu. We spent the last 2 days just hanging out by the pool at the resort. And this poem is called Lazy River. My son's name is Jude, and that's all you need to know for this poem. 1. I let Jude do all the work in the lazy river because lazy river. 2. We pass several empty tubes in the lazy river. Some people didn't make it. 3. I want to take the lazy river back to California, but not today. And this next one, earlier in the trip, make sure I get the right page on this one. Earlier in the trip, I was in bed, and my wife had set an alarm on her iPad. My wife's name is Addie, and she was in the other room but left the iPad on the bed, and it just went off while I was sleeping, and she was already awake. And it was 2 years ago when the Olympics were happening, and so this poem is called "The Olympics Wake Me Up This Morning." The Olympics wake me up this morning. They came to my hotel room and did gymnastics on the bed. I don't know who gave them a key. I recognized the announcer's voice when he was on the TV. It was a thrill, to say the least. Tickets are usually so hard to get. Addie heard and rushed in. She apologized for the commotion, as if the Olympics are her fault. Jude stayed in the other room, clearing his throat. It was a little early for me, as I usually don't have the Olympics over, not before coffee anyway, and they didn't want any. So I faced them towards the window and went to take a shower. There you go. A couple of poems from I Am Not Writing a Book of Poems
Excellent.
in Hawaii.
Anybody want to chime in?
I love an intriguing title to draw me into the poem. And that poem certainly lived up to the title, personifying the Olympics in your hotel room. Now, was that hotel in Hawaii?
It was the Hilton Hawaiian Village in Oahu, right on the edge of Waikiki, and for whatever reason, the iPad just went off and the Olympics started blaring out from it.
As I recall, that was a Winter Olympics, wasn't it? Or was it?
Well, it was July or August, so
I see. I'm sorry.
I feel like it probably wasn't the Winter Olympics, but I don't mean to be a contrarian. Titles, sometimes a title comes before the poem or the book. I was telling Rick before we started, because he mentioned my book, The Gettysburg Undress, and I knew that I was going that particular trip. We were going to visit Washington D.C. and Gettysburg, which is on the way to D.C. from Allentown, Pennsylvania, where we dropped our kid off to be with his grandparents, in Richmond, Virginia, and Baltimore. So I knew we were going to go to Gettysburg, and I'm kind of known for these silly, funny little things. So the phrase "the Gettysburg Undress" came into my head before I even got onto the plane to go on that trip. And then at that point, I'm kind of obligated to make sure I write a poem that includes that phrase, or else we've just, delegitimized the whole thing. So there you go on that one. So speaking of wrestling, you mentioned I have this book called God Wrestler. This came out a few years ago. One of the traditions of being Jewish is every week you're supposed to study the Torah. And if you've ever been to a bar or bat mitzvah, the kid who is having the bar or bat mitzvah, they are reading from the Torah. And they are not reading a text that they selected. They're reading text that they're supposed to read on that particular day. And it's so they don't have a choice. And there's a cycle. This goes around every single year, and it goes through the entire Torah, which is the first 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament, which starts with the creation of the world and ends with the Israelites getting out of Egypt and just being about to get back into Israel. So, as someone who'd been writing some Jewish poems about holidays and other kinds of things, I wanted to be able to participate in that tradition, and decided I was going to write a poem every single week for the Torah portion. But then I would always have that idea in the middle of the year, as opposed to when the Torah started shortly after Rosh Hashanah. And I thought, okay, well, I can't start this in December. That doesn't make sense. So I got out of doing it because I kept forgetting to start it when the cycle started over. And then I finally remembered to do it. And the first set of those is collected in this book. I'm going to read a poem from it. And I like to give the context as well, that because, hearing all that, it could sound like I'm some kind of religious zealot or something like that. And I'm really not. This comes from the point of view of wanting to participate in the tradition of this, not so much as a believer. And that's really where the title comes in, God Wrestler. There's a story about Jacob wrestling with an angel, and the angel turns out in the story to be God, and then his name gets changed to Israel, which means one who wrestles with God. So the whole concept of Israel, and the Jewish people are also known as Israel, are people who struggle with it. So when I tell you that I'm not necessarily a believer, but I really want to do this out of the tradition and just out of interest because people have been doing it for thousands of years, it comes from that point of view, as it's very much in line with wrestling with the whole thing whatsoever. Also, I should mention that the poem I'm reading is one for this coming week's Torah portion, because it's also my belief, and belief is a weird word to use, having just told you I'm not a non-believer, to tell you that the tradition says this is the week that you study this particular text. So I can't, even though there might be a poem from a month from now that's way funnier and is going to really go over so well with audiences, I can't read that one because we're not there in the text. So this week's Torah portion is we're going through a bunch of laws, so I'm going to read the poem from this book, that I wrote a few years ago. And then I'm going to read another one that I just wrote last week for this coming week's Torah portion as well. It's amazing we invented the concept of the scapegoat only to have it used against us during the Second War to end all wars. And one can't help but feel bad for the goat, both of them really, one to be sacrificed and the other to be sent off into the desert. Who decides? What did either of these goats do? What did any of us do? And then there's the story of the holiest spot there is, and most of us can never go there, just the one person on the one day, dressed in white. Don't worry, it's ages before Labor Day. Enters through a cloud of smoke, apologizes for everything everyone has done. It's the ultimate backstage pass. I guess if someone is willing to take responsibility for all my sins, I'll find other places to be holy. I think it was Han Solo who famously said, "It's not my fault." Honestly, I have nothing else to say about that. I just think it's important to mention Han Solo periodically. And speaking of famous people, this is the portion that proves definitively that Dracula couldn't be Jewish. Don't drink blood, cover it with dust, it says in the text. I'm sorry, Vlad, you are not one of us. And if you ever needed a list of who not to sleep with, or more specifically, whose nakedness not to uncover, may I suggest Leviticus chapter 18. This is the one that fuels the fire of the homophobes. But the text isn't as specific as they would have you believe. Let's eliminate the prefixes from the word, leaving only sexuality. I took French in high school where the word mot means word. Here it means death. Sometimes I just want to be in Paris. So that was when that book came. When I was writing that book, I was reading the entire text of the weekly Torah portion and just kind of writing a poem that responds to it. So all the poems in that book are those poems where I just tried to find, so there's a lot of different things in there because I was really bouncing off a lot of the things that I was reading. I think the second year, as I mentioned, since this is something you're supposed to do all the time, not just 1 year and then you stop doing it. The second year, I looked at a set of text. There's this companion text that the rest of the Bible is after the first 5 books, and I wrote poems about those pieces. The third year, I wrote so each Torah portion is divided into 7 sections, and really you only, well, it doesn't matter. So I wrote a haiku for each section. So every week I wrote 7 haiku after reading the whole thing. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do now? So I launched into a 7-year project in which I'm currently in the 5th year, where the first year I found just one line of text that resonated with me, and I wrote a poem that responded to that line of text. And I did that every week. The second year I found a line of text in the second section of the text, etc. So I'm in the 5th year of doing that now. So this is the poem I wrote for this week's Torah portion. The same text that I just read a big poem about, but this is a brand new one from this week. And this one is actually responds to 3 little lines in the 5th section, and the poem is called "Your Beard, Your Neighbors, Your Sheep," and each one begins with a line of text from the text. 1, you shall not round off the corner of your beard, and you shall not destroy the edge of your beard. Sorry, you shall not round off the corner of your head, and you shall not destroy the edge of your beard. It didn't take much research for me to learn that rounding off the corner of your head specifically was referring to your hair and not the structure of your skull. This reminds me, our 14-year-old is overdue for a haircut. I am prepared to yell sinner at him and his stylist if the results are too round. Regarding destroying the edges of my beard, I think they mean cutting, but I do appreciate the drama in the language. 2. You shall not act on the basis of omens or lucky hours. Okay, I won't, but is there a chart of what the lucky hours are I can refer to so I don't accidentally buy lottery tickets during them? I don't want to be misconstrued as a lucky hour purveyor. 3. You shall not crossbreed your livestock with different species. As the folk singer Fred Small used to say when he sang his song about the moose and the cow who found each other, it takes a lot of courage to date outside your species. I promise not to force the issue. 4. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. This is the big one which so many people forget. They say if you get rid of all the words and just leave these, you'll know everything you need to know. Let's all stand on one foot and say them together. There you go. That is the Jewish poetry section of today.
I'm curious, Rick, when the children read the sections of the Torah out loud, are they reading in Hebrew or are they reading in English?
They're reading in Hebrew. That is, they have to spend, a lot of what their studying does is learning how not just to read but to chant the text of their Torah portion. And there's a whole methodology to it on how to chant it and where you make the words, go up and go down in terms of the way you're kind of singing, chanting it. And it's so, it ends up that most kids kind of end up memorizing it from a recording, but the whole idea is you're learning how to read it.
Yes.
And that's, so they're actually, and in terms of English, there's different traditions at different places where it happens, but sometimes it's translated into English. At a bar bat mitzvah, it's a tradition for the kid to talk about what they just read. So even if they're not literally translating it, they might, say, well, this is what I read and this is what it has to do with, this is what I think it has to do today. Because that's really the whole reason you're reading it, is to try to figure out why is this ancient text, what is it telling you about your life today? And that's sometimes a struggle because there are things in it which are very difficult to read. There's text on how you're supposed to treat your slaves, for example, or your indentured servants. And it's actually very humane in the context of having slaves, which is awfully nice. But of course, today we don't have slaves and indentured servants. So how do you interpret things like that, that don't seem like they have anything to do with the way that we live our lives today? So that's how the English comes along, and that we talk about what we just read and what it might mean.
I can see how, given the ancient language, perhaps candlelight, and from what you're describing, it would be incantatory. I could see how that would be very mesmerizing for those who might be participating. Yeah,
I mean, often those services happen in the mornings or afternoons, so it's not so much at night. So the candlelight is not necessarily a part of this particular thing, but evening services which don't have anything to do with reading the Torah come along, like a Friday night Shabbat service or something, which, you can set a mood and light candles. And there's almost no Jewish thing that happens without candles being lit or food being eaten at the end of it. Even when you abstain from food, like when you have a fast, where the whole point is to not eat, that ends with a giant meal, you know. So
Right.
Jews don't go too long without eating, I'll tell you, you know.
I just wanted to tell you that I think your book, God Wrestler, is just a fabulous idea, because to me, this is symbolic of the wrestling that we all do with God, whoever we think it is, or
Sure.
isn't.
Thank you. Yeah, I take it to heart, you know, and I think that, you know, there's a whole different way to be religious, in which you do things automatically out of faith because you're told you have to do it. And when, you know, people who believe like that, and maybe there's someone here who's that kind of person who's brought up with a real devout faith, you know, if someone says, well, I'm not going to do that because it doesn't feel right, or questions it, like, the sensibility of that person is, well, that's not how you're supposed to do that. And
Right.
you know, and it's that's not my sensibility, and I have respect, you know, I don't mean to decry that, but it really resonates to me, the whole idea of wrestling with the text and questioning it and figuring out what it means and how it's important for today, and if it's important today, and maybe it's a thing that doesn't seem right, and that's the whole point. It's an example of how we're supposed to look at that as you know, what not to do. You might know the story of early on in that text. There's a story of God tells Abraham, you have to go kill your son now. Go take him up to a mountain and kill him. And Abraham is incredibly devout, says, yes, okay, God, you're telling me to do, not what I want to do, but that's what you're saying. Great.
I'll do it.
Gets up there, is just about to do it. And then an angel comes along and says, okay, we believe you. You don't have to do that. So, you know, and they end up killing a ram who happens to be in the bushes. So some say, okay, Abraham passed that test, you know, and because Abraham did what God said. And others, another less popular thought is, well, Abraham actually didn't pass that test. Abraham should have said, that's not the right thing to do. And, you know, and so I really, you know, so there's all kinds of ways to look at it, that struggle.
In the context of the Canaanite religions, though, that were contemporary at the time, child sacrifice was a thing, and I'm sure that part of that's, you know, like, that's not really the thing that I want. So it's not the thing to do. So yeah, great story. Very mythic.
Thanks, Norma. I think you wanted to say something.
Yes. Can I be heard?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I'm not muted.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. I've been waiting fruitlessly for someone to comment on the remarkable sense of humor that our poet has. It's intellectual, it's down to earth, it's enormously witty, and just totally delightful. I am loving all your stuff, and relating to the extent I can on your thoughts about Judaism, because my dear granddaughter is a convert. And as one of my Jewish friends said, converts are the most ardent practices of Judaism. Anyway, she didn't go to the extent of shaving her head and wearing a black garment, but she almost got to that extent. Anyway, I've been to some seders at her family's house, her husband's family's house, and loved it. And so the taste I've had through sharing her experience, has made me feel very congenial with Judaism.
I'm glad to hear that. It'd be terrible if you had a different reaction. And thank you for your. I mean, I guess we were all waiting for you to say how hilarious I am. So I
Yes.
appreciate you
I,
saying
I
that and
want somebody
appreciating.
to say how enormously intellectually witty you are.
Well, let's see if that happens.
I want to let everybody know that I've also put in the chat a link to Amazon, which has all of his works on there. If you'd like to order a book or recording, check the chat.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you, Rick, for bringing Rick Lupert to us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh, you were right. You were saying that to the other Rick. That was confusing. I was going to say, yeah, it's all I have to offer. But and thank you for posting that link. All my books are there. You can listen, to the spoken word album for free on any streaming site that you want as well. And if you're particularly interested in the Jewish poetry, I have a Jewish poetry website called jewishpoetry.net, where there are links to my Jewish poetry collections, as well as I post a new poem every single week, and I send them out via email as well. If you want to get those directly in your email box at jewishpoetry.net, you can subscribe to that there as well. And yeah. Should I read a couple other poems?
Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a new book coming out, I think in May. I'm waiting just on one. I'm waiting for a back cover blurb. Honestly, that's the one thing that's holding it up at the moment. It's another travel poetry book. It's one that I wrote last summer when I had the chance to visit. Addie and I went to Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, and Asheville, North Carolina. And so these are a couple of poems from that. These are early on in the book. This first one is called I Want to Get Wet. The book is called, by the way, The Low Country Schwitz. So, and I think this follows a poem which I'm not reading, in which Addie had told me that she was looking at the weather before we went and said there's a 50% chance that it'll rain every day of our vacation. This poem is called I Want to Get Wet. We dropped Jude off at camp 2 days ago. There's a consistent quiet in our house, which I appreciate but am not used to. We saw a picture of him wearing white with his arms wrapped similarly around similarly dressed teens. This is the time when their arms start to get busy with each other. We're hoping to fly away on Saturday. It is Saturday in case, we're hoping to fly away on Sunday. It is Saturday in case you're making a timeline. But there are tests to be done, and depending on their results, we may cancel everything. Jay, who lives in Chicago and is afraid of holes, says their camp requires you to be 6 hours away in case it all goes to hell. Savannah, Georgia will take longer to return from in case it all goes to hell. I'm praying for Georgian rain to land on my head. Where's the other one? Well, all right. Yeah, I think I meant to read the Caution You May Get Wet poem. So here's the next one. These are early on. I haven't even gotten on the trip yet. Once we drop our kid off at camp, I'm already on vacation, even though I'm still at home. So here it is. Caution, you may get wet. Addie says there's a 50% chance it will rain every day of our vacation. That's right. It's a vacation. So I hope you appreciate that I'm doing all the work of writing this book while on vacation. I'm writing it for you. Speaking of you, I hope it's not raining where you are, unless you like the rain, in which case I hope it's raining as much as you want it to. As for me, although I understand the Southwest is running out of water, which is why we decided to let the lawn go, here where I am writing this book even before the vacation starts, because there's nothing I wouldn't do for you. I think I lost track of where that last sentence was going. I hope to take time away from writing things down to lose track of things. Anyway, I prefer it not to rain, but we'll pack umbrellas just in case.
Great.
There you go. That's from the Low Country Schwitz. That'll be out hopefully in May.
I'm sorry, what is a Schwitz?
Oh, good question. I guess we're getting back to Jewish content. That's a Yiddish word, and that's where you're sweating. You're schwitzing.
Oh,
Yiddish is one of those languages which sounds like a bunch of drunk guys invented the whole thing one night in a pub. And there are so many Yiddish words which have invaded the English language that already. And it's like whenever if you don't speak Yiddish, you hear this word and you just kind of know what it means. Like, schmuck. What does schmuck mean? I don't know, but you know what schmuck means. That guy's a schmuck. There was another word someone just told me that I didn't realize was Yiddish. Could it have been glitch? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if that was the word. That I was just surprised was a Yiddish word, and there's just so many of them. That person's a mensch. A schwitz is one of them. It's where you're sweating. In Savannah, Georgia, and in Charleston, it was incredibly humid. And they call that part of the Carolinas the Low Country. One of the very first thing we did on our first full day in Georgia was we went on a walking tour of Savannah, Georgia, which was specifically focused on the slave history of Savannah. A really uplifting way to begin our vacation. And the guy who led the tour, his name was Fritz. And so I wrote a poem for him. And for a while, I was going to call the book Schwitzing with Fritz. But then, and then it just kind of evolved into the Low Country Schwitz. Felt a bit more inclusive to the rest of the experience.
Love it.
So I guess we got about 10 minutes left. I've got two more poems on my list. So a lot of the travel poems, if you get any of the travel books, a lot of them are real short observations. I'm writing them on the go. It's enough for my wife already that I'm writing an entire book while she's standing next to me during 2 weeks on a vacation. We're in a museum and she's 3 rooms ahead of me because I just need to get this observations, these hilarious things that I've thought of that have to be written down about every painting or whatever. So that's the kind of sensibility. And then kind of in the morning and at night, I'll write longer poems, kind of whatever, assessing the whole days and that kind of thing. So we just went to Philadelphia to celebrate Passover, actually, with my wife's family. We actually went to Allentown, but we were flying to Philadelphia. And I ended up writing all this stuff on the plane, very much in the vein of these travel books. And so I thought I'd read to you something that I just wrote. It's not printed or published anywhere, called Flying to Philadelphia. While waiting to board a flight to Philadelphia, we're seated in the wheelchair brigade, old Jewish people section. One of them says she's going to take a knockout pill. Another says This coffee's too hot. These are my people, and eventually I will be one of them. It's so close. In the men's room, a sign says to stop human trafficking. I want to, but feel there's only so much I can do while washing my hands in an airport bathroom. In the exit row, I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary. A sticker on the door says armed. I'd like the word armed to only ever refer to exit row doors or my actual arms. The weight of the responsibilities of being seated in the exit row is not lost on me. I spend extra time with the flight attendant discussing how to open the door. She warns me not to lean into it or I'll go out with the door. Nobody wants that. Only a small subset of people want that. Addie's seatmate arrives. It's a fully grown man and not one of the toddlers we saw heading to the back of the plane. Everyone is disappointed. I hope he can handle the obligations of this row. Someone brought a tiny dog on board. I don't know why I'm not taking my cat everywhere. The pilot says there is weather, but that's as specific as he gets. 2 of the items in the food menu have the word shaker in them. I will spend the rest of my life wondering what a chicken shaker is. I have more leg room than I deserve. They call this plane an Airbus, but they don't call buses ground planes. They want to know if there's anything we can do to make our flight more enjoyable. I've got a list of things topped with mummenschanz and a puppet show. I'd be willing to host the open mic. The way Addie slides her finger up her phone to do whatever she needs to do in the game she is playing is mesmerizing, especially when her finger soars off the iPad glass and rests in the air while she watches the results of her efforts. With all this extra leg space, it would be gratuitous of me to lean my seat back. In the unlikely event of an emergency, I will do whatever is necessary. I see the ocean, but I'm not going to be a dick about it. The waves look frozen, which I know isn't possible. I swear I'm going to be the first one to pee on this plane. There are no power ports in the exit row, like back in the caveman days. One guy, let's call him General Bill Entitled Man, has already gone to the bathroom, opened up the overhead bin, and stood in the aisle commingling with his luggage, all while the fasten seatbelt sign was still on. He's the first one I'm pushing out the exit row door when I open it up to pee out the side of this plane. I'd say we're soaring to heights unknown, but I've known these heights before. The speaker above our heads is uncomfortably loud, but it's still funny when the pilot starts talking and I yell, "Louder!" I am not writing a book in the sky on this plane. Earlier today, I asked the barista which of their coffees had the most caffeine. She told me, and now I'm dealing with the results of the choices I've made. Addie is falling asleep in every direction. Somewhere on the ground, I hope that motherfucker is getting arrested. That was arraignment day, by the way. The exit row has its pluses and minuses. Consider this a writing prompt. It sounds like the pilot said ladies and German, which makes me uncomfortable. On the way to the bathroom, I pass by the man from our row. He acts like he has no idea who I am. I know Spielberg doesn't want me to watch his film on my laptop screen. Horizon on top, interesting. Horizon on bottom, interesting. Horizon in the middle, boring as fuck. The last scene steals the whole movie. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., our son visits the Holocaust Museum. He wasn't prepared. How could anyone be prepared? The ground couldn't come soon enough.
Oh, great.
Oh.
Really good.
So there you go. This is the last poem I had selected to read. And Rick, thank you so much again for having me. Often when you get invited to read, they ask you to read, and you read, and then you sit down, and it's all fine. But to have the chance to engage with people in conversation is a real gift, and I really appreciate your attention and your interest and your questions. And just thanks so much for being here this afternoon. This is a poem I wrote not too long ago. It seems like when we turn on the TV or listen to the news every single day, there's something that's really horrifying going on or embarrassing as a citizen of America who cares about other people, so this is just, well, this is a poem called A Day in the Life. Here in the greatest country in the world, kids in Wisconsin are told not to sing about kindness. Meanwhile, in Nashville, a gun kills children at another school. This is just one day in America.
Well said, sir. Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a reminder that I have a link there in the chat if you'd like to go on Amazon and search through his selection of books and offerings. Rick, thank you so much for reading for us today. I really enjoyed it. And, as I was telling Rick before, one day I somehow friended him on Facebook, and I always enjoyed reading his posts, and they often made me smile and laugh. And one day now where did I meet this guy? And I started clicking around, and I'm so thankful I did. So thankful. Thank you so much again for being here.
Just be careful who's watching when you're clicking around, Rick. And I'm delighted to meet you and make another acquaintance in poetry. And I appreciate you listening and reaching out. That meant quite a lot. If any of you are poets and writers, and I know some of you are, I recognize some names out there. I host a reading every single week on Tuesday evenings via Zoom called the Virtual Cobalts. It's something I hosted in person for almost 21 years. And until the venue closed down. And when the pandemic came along, I launched it as a Zoom series, and it's got people from all over the country and all over the world who come, and it's a really nice community, and people who are really eager to listen, as well as share their own poetry. And I just think that's such an essential component of an event and of being an artist, is wanting to receive as much as give. So these are people who not only want to share their poetry, but who eagerly welcome your work. You're welcome and desired there. It's Tuesday nights at 7:30 p.m. And the website, if you want to check it out, is poetrysuperhighway.com/cobalt.
Okay, and I'll put that
Where does this originate, Rick? I mean, is it an East Coast thing, or is it here on the West Coast? Or?
Well, I live in LA, and the Cobalt Cafe existed in the San Fernando Valley for a long time. And until it closed, it was an all ages music venue, kind of started out as a coffee house. And so when I started it up again, I thought, oh, great. The people who used to come will be happy to show up again. And it turns out the internet, you can get it from all over the world. And so people just started showing up from all sorts of places. So it's really grown to be a widely attended thing, or people attended from wide varieties of places, I guess. Yeah.
It's interesting, the word fuck. It comes, you can look it up in the Dictionary of Slang, I think it's called. But I remember a guy by the name of Lenny Bruce who did stand-up. And I remember seeing Lenny, not in person, but on black and white television. And at that time, the word was like dropping a bomb. Now it's just generally accepted everywhere.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think you still have to be careful to not overuse it. I mean, I say it a lot more than I use it in poetry. And if I do, it's because I know it's going to have an impact or an emphasis.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I don't want it to be gratuitous. Regarding Lenny Bruce, anyone who's a fan of him and that era of comedy, I highly recommend the show on Amazon Prime, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel,
Yes.
in which he is a recurring character. And it's really funny, really funny, and well worth checking out. And regarding the word "fuck," as long as we brought it up, I don't know that you can actually listen to this, but my friend Brendan Constantine, who's a poet here in Southern Cal, and a poet well worth your time here in this venue or checking out in general, he did his master's presentation. He went to Vermont College of Fine Arts and was, as a low residency school. And his final, everyone had to give an oral report, and he did an hour presentation on the word "fuck," which I got to hear. I heard a recording of, and it was brilliant in terms of the different ways people use it and have used it and where it came from and all kind. It was in terms of I've never heard a more intellectual dissertation on that word. But anyway, Rick, if you're looking for other people for this space, Brendan, you can't go wrong with him. So
Okay, great. Good tip. Okay, so let's throw this open to other people who have a poem that they'd like to share.
Thank you, Rick, for bringing us Rick.
Yes. Can we applaud for Rick? Rick?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
He has a great poem called "The Rules of Poetry." So that's located on that recording.
Well, I guess I can lead off if you'd like.
Sure.
I have a very short poem. It's only 6 lines. Recently, a friend of mine returned from a trip to Thebes and Luxor in Egypt, and talking about schwitzing. And she was talking about how warm and humid it was there in the fierce sunlight, and how, in comparison, how cool and quiet the tombs and the pyramids, interior of the pyramids were. But anyhow, I wrote her a little poem here to greet her when she got back. I'm kind of introducing her to the world of the art of poetry. And this is called "An Obstreperous Tut Goes Swimming." Runners arrived in Luxor with news of overflowing Tigris and Euphrates, news sure to make the pharaoh smile. Minister of Waters rushed over stones to fill Tutankhamun with celebrations. But the pharaoh was already in denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Rick, I have to leave. I'm being picked up for dinner at my son's house, and I can't be late.
Okay, Norma.
So reluctantly, I have to go and say goodbye to all of you dear people. And
Thanks for
thank
joining.
you again to Rick Lupert.
Hey, Allegra, I
thank
see
you,
your hand
Norma.
raised.
Nice to meet you.
Leo, does your sweatshirt say "so many chocolates"?
So many chocolates.
And so little time? I guessed it. How true that is.
I used to have Baskin Robbins stores.
Oh.
Love ice cream too.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else has another poem to share?
Allegra has one.
Somewhere beneath the redwood tree, a circle of seats cut from the large trunk of a dying pine that toppled in last year's windstorm. I wait, incense of pine around me. Wait to be lifted from melancholy that pushes against me like some ruthless lust that pins me to the ground. Until a small voice inside rises from the shadowed place, telling me shadows come because somewhere there is light.
Mm.
Thank you, Allegra.
Thank you.
Elda, how about you? Want to unmute yourself? Unmute yourself, Elda. And there we go.
Oh, all right. My husband and I are now caretakers for a great grandchild who is about 21 months of age. And that brought me to going back to reading some of my old poems. And it brought me up to one of my children's inspirations when he was about 2 years old. And so this is the poem that I've written years ago. It's called A 2-Year-Old Tells Me. Raindrops make circles in the pool, make round spots on the sidewalk, and make my shirts wet. At night, planes move, stars stay still. Shoes are for outside, pink is for girls. It's sad to have a sick sister. Blue lights are for birthdays. Other lights are for Christmas. Raw carrots are too hard, so dogs eat them. Cats don't like carrots. At Walmart, there are boy things, girl things, and stuff for daddies. Grandma, fish die.
Thank you.
And one more very short one. It's called
Sure.
Just As It Did. Just as it did when I was 1, the sun does rise and set, and rivers flow, and trees bear fruit, and babies tend to cry. Just as it did when I was 30, the moon and the stars still shine, and lovers love, they bear fruit, and babies tend to cry. Just as it did when I was 60, the rain and the snow still fall, and seasons pass and years add up, and babies tend to cry.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Me.
Hey, Mark, go for it.
Hi, Rick.
Hi.
Both Ricks. Rick Lupert, I don't think I've seen you live for maybe 15 years. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's been quite some time, Mark. Good to see you.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Time stands still sometimes because it's waiting for us to walk up to it and take a selfie with it. Time has an ego too and wants its special moments shared, but lacks the hands to hold the camera now that most clocks and watches are digital. Old-fashioned clocks have run out of their time. Time stands still sometimes because it too wants to wake up and smell the coffee. Time will stand behind you in line at Starbucks. From over your shoulder, peruse the word soup menu and tick, tick, tick its impatience along with you as the front of the line customer finally settles on chocolate cookie crumble cream frappuccino, but then insists it gets mixed with the vanilla cream frappuccino and the strawberry cream frappuccino just to have a true Neapolitan experience. Time will agree with you that this line is a monumental waste of time, as long as you call it Siri first and ask politely. Time stands still sometimes because it's upset that you're wasting it. The time puts you in a corner on a 5-minute timeout, punishing you with silence and forcing you to listen to your own heartbeats as your body tightens with dramatic tension and ringing ears. Meanwhile, your brain attempts to fill the empty space with regrets that taste like bleach, burning but never cleaning your insides. Time much prefers that you ignore it until you get involved in something else and lose all track of time. Then time wants your attention back. Time can be like Prince's mother. Time is never satisfied. And that, my friend, is what it sounds like when the alarm clock cries.
Thank you, Mark. I have one called Love Encased in Amber. A restaurant called Amber, and a scotch like none I've tasted. As Krishna plays his flute above, with a song from ancient times. Over a dinner of saffron, chicken, and lamb, supervised by the Hindu god Ganesha, two aging hearts come together, weaving together a remembrance. Recounting love's toll on our hearts, prizes won and prices paid along the journey, and hopes for what lies ahead. For me, the quest begins again. Unspoken prayers and ultimate questions are hardwired in our weathered souls. To serve, to search, and to love is unquestioned, a higher calling for those who seek. Pictures to mark the start of a new epoch, a debt shared and the giving of thanks. How precious these moments binding our past tied to an evolving present. Anyone else?
Linda.
Linda. Go ahead and unmute.
Eternal night flights with my Finnish relatives. Oh, and by the way, Elda is my sister. This might be about her a bit too. Not again. Here I am flying lilting laps in my childhood bedroom, flying nightly, quietly, right under the ceiling, close enough so that I can swat down corner cobwebs, along with memories, this cornerstone of dreams. When I look down now, I can see my 8-year-old self already deep in days of the past. In another dream, I throw open my window sash to a sobbing, soaked cat. Once on my bed, this critter changes into frightening shapes. So much for good deeds. These two dreams are the least of my worries. For decades, I am in that childhood home in my mind, conversing with family, neighbors, relatives, everything, everywhere, a problem. The wire holding up dreams. I read over my years of dream accounts scribbled in spiral notebooks in the dead of night, this maze of names, problems, Piccadilly, the disasters. All of us from the dead to the living appear with much need to rehash the past. All the discussions about clothes, houses, money, divorces, death. These memories are like dead fish. That's something you really should deal with. And the minutiae we recount eternally. I wonder why my sister, in that one dream, commented again on my choice of necklace to wear at her wedding. Get over it. It's only been 50 years. This might. I'll chew on this for a while, on everything. My dead Finnish relatives coming back for coffee and UP Treasury toast with nothing but time on their hands, with laments, regret, and rye, not rye bread, offerings.
Thank you, Linda. Ken.
Hi, thanks so much. How great to see everyone. Rick Lupert reminds me of the Alameda fabulous person, Robert Lippert, who was the king of the B movies and invented a number of things having to do with motion pictures and stuff. Anyway, another thing that Rick's recitation reminded me of was the fabulous Molly Ivins. And I had a poem for Molly Ivins. Molly Ivins, who are you? You do so much, you might be two. Your martial facts, your reason, please. Come to think, you might be three. Your pointed wit, your sense of fun. You are unique, the only one.
Thanks, Ken. Anyone else?
I've got some more.
Sure. Go for it.
Is it okay?
Sure.
All righty. This goes back about to the time of my profile picture in San Francisco. The Acme Metal Spinning Works Cafe was one of the early pioneer, that is to say, in the recent decades, pioneer San Francisco gourmet restaurant. And it was forced to suspend its operations when a mysterious foamy substance was discovered floating out and covering the floor. They had to evacuate the customers. The problem was ceased when they emptied the liquid hand soap reservoirs in the restrooms and refilled it with regular hand soap, because they had before tried to put in bubble bath. It's called suds. The sign on the lavatory wall demands all when leaving must wash their hands. Comes one who observes the sign and rubs and dubs a lather fine. A quick wash off, and a rush to the towels with nary a glance at the basin's bowels. The next one comes to do the same, still not seeing the foam in the drains. So there's foam in the sink and foam on the floor. There's foam that's foaming right up in the door. There's foam in the mirror and foam on the walls. There's foam that's creeping on into the stalls. Some mounds of foam might please the eye, but these seem mounting to the sky. This mad tale I relate that you may know of the sad, sad fate, and how an awful lot of terrible trouble got its start from a few little bubbles.
Thank you, Ken. It's great.
Rick,
Yes.
can you hear me? This is David.
Hi, David. Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Well, I've not been able to turn on my video. I don't know why.
Okay,
May I?
sure.
To the dog next door at 3 a.m. Your name I forgot, but your bark I cannot. You bark, and you bark, and you bark. You bark to the north, to the south, and in between, to the east, to the west, near the head of my bed. You're doggish or not, so I don't understand. So you bark sharp, you bark loud, you bark long. Insomnia is my problem. What's yours? Are your people asleep? Why did you bark at midnight, at 1 and at 2? After 3, you slacked off. You sleep when it's hot and bark when it's cool. We don't. We're human. You're a dog, and I lack a burlet for bark. Don't you know that if I let my mind slip, the dog catcher's but a phone call away? So why do you bark, and you bark, and you bark?
Thank you. That's great.
Rick, that's from a new book. I actually got one published.
Outstanding. Anyone else? Cleo, I'm looking at you. Come on, Cleo, you got one, don't you?
Don't have anything prepared, and my voice gives out.
Okay.
Thank you.
So want to let people know that we will be scheduling soon the instead of meeting on Sunday, I'm going to be meeting on a Saturday in this month. I'm going to have to I work Saturdays, so I'm going to have to carve out some time in my schedule. But we want to have a chaparral meeting for the contest winners and for people to hear the poems that were got prizes and honorable mentions for the contest. So be look in your inbox. I should be able to have a date for you sometime this week or later in the probably I'm guessing 3rd or 4th week of April of May. Okay. Anyone else? Going once, going twice? I love that old picture of Ken.
Thank you.
Guys, Ken's your hand is up. Do you have another poem?
Okay. Good night, all.
Okay, we're going to sign off then. Thank you all. Thank you again, Rick.
Yeah.
Wonderful meeting. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rick. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, both Ricks. You bet. What a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Rickocella.
Yeah, I will definitely be catching that Tuesday evening show. I will definitely haunt you. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Please do.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for a beautiful, beautiful time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.